Hello everyone, welcome back to Owensboro, Kentucky. Welcome once again to the little studio which is set up in my living room. My name is Michael C. Garrett. I'll be doing the talking. Don is a few feet away. He's operating the camera. And it's good to be with you again. We were not able to make a video last week. And I found out that the same conditions which existed last week exist this week. And all goes back to my toe. Remember, Don, the hat that says "Save the Toe"?
Uh-huh.
Can you hand that to me? 2 weeks ago, I wore the hat that said "Save the Toe." Well, at this present time, ever so often I wear this hat. Sometimes when I go to the doctor's office, because I want to remind him that I have every intention of saving my toe and not losing my toe or my toes. It goes back to the same problem which almost took my life the evening of September 5th into the early morning hours of September 6th, when literally Luke saved my life. Had it not been for Luke being there when he was, Michael C. would have passed away out in the front driveway from septic shock, which comes from sepsis. That's where the infection ends up in your blood and the blood becomes infected. And at that point, the clock starts ticking as to how long you will actually stay alive. And it was Luke who came to my aid and who literally got me to the hospital, or otherwise I would have died. If I had not have run into Luke that evening, and it was miraculous that we did run into each other. Luke wasn't even planning on going to the gym that night. He just did it on a spur of a moment. I have sometimes called him the Apostle Luke. The word apostle means one sent to do a job, to perform a mission. And on that night, Luke was sent to the gym to find me and to save my life. And so I will forever be thankful to Jesus Christ for what he did and what he arranged. And I will forever be thankful to Luke for what he did. And I'm very proud of both of them. And speaking of Luke, on Monday, this past Monday, Luke and I went to a restaurant by the name of Oscar's. It's on the west side here in Owensboro. I have gone there multiple times to pick up some food to take back to Luke when he was at work. Many of the times when I walked into the restaurant to make the order, there was a young man working behind the bar. And I always thought he was a very friendly person, a very outgoing person, a very uplifting person. I always thought very highly of him. Most of the time I did not know his name, but I just thought, that's a good fella, that's a good guy. I've often talked about people who have sweet spirits, and I've talked about people who have sour spirits. And I love people who have sweet spirits. I really do. And I do not want to be around people who have sour spirits. I just really don't. I have no need for them. I have enough negativity in my life. I don't need to go out finding more negativity. And for the record, Luke has a very, very sweet, wonderful, kind, caring, gentle, loving disposition. And I think the world of Luke. And I don't hide that from anybody. I'm not ashamed of it. Very proud of it. And the last time I went by Oscar's to pick up some food, Oscar, this young man came over to where I was, near the cash register. And I just said, "Excuse me, what is your name?" And he said that his name was Oscar. Well, the name of the restaurant has Oscars. And I said, "Is that the same Oscar that is up on the sign?" He said, "Well, it's sort of." He said, "My father is also named Oscar, and his father had been in the Mexican food business for a long time at another restaurant here in town. And technically, and I found this sort of a shock to me, technically I found out that young Oscar is the owner of the restaurant. But he's doing so, I think, with the help and the guidance, the tutelage of his father, which I think is a wonderful gift for a father to go out of his way to give his son a legacy, in this case a business and an income. I think that's a beautiful story. I really do. I find it heartwarming. But I eventually found out that the ownership of the restaurant is in the name of Oscar, the young Oscar. Well, that last time I was there, I said, "Well, Oscar, where did you grow up?" He said, "Oh, right here in Owensboro, my whole life." I said, "What high school did you go to?" He said, "Davis County High School." And I thought, that's the high school Luke went to. I asked him, "When did you graduate?" And the date he gave me was in the general ballpark of when Luke graduated. And I thought to myself, there's no way that Oscar knows my Luke. And so I said, "Do you know Luke?" And I said Luke's last name. I don't say Luke's last name on the camera because I don't want anybody in any way bothering him or harassing him. But trust me, he has a last name. And in one sense, the name is similar to my name. The vowels, the consonants, the way things line up. I find it quite interesting. And I said, so again, Oscar and I are talking. I said, "Do you know Luke?" And I said his last name. And Oscar got this look in his face like, "Oh, there's no way that you know my buddy from high school." And so Oscar started going through his phone, trying to find a picture. Now, I don't know about you, but every young person I know seems to have about 5,000 photographs in their phone. I don't keep that many photographs in my phone. And so while he's going through his phone, I quickly picked mine up, opened it up, hit a button, and there was a picture of Luke. And he goes, "Yeah, that's Luke. I know Luke. Do you know Luke?" I said, "Luke and I are very, very good friends. Yes, I do." So we had a nice chat over that. And on that particular afternoon, I took a picture of Oscar, and somehow it got sent to Luke. It was supposed to be sent, so that when I showed up with the food, Luke already knew that I had met Oscar and had a conversation. Well, on Monday, Luke and I were going to have a meal together. And we started talking about, well, where do you want to go? Well, I don't know, where do you want to go? And we batted that back and forth. And so I wrote down about 5 restaurants which I would enjoy eating at. And I encouraged Luke, pick out one of these restaurants. And I put the name Oscar down, Oscar's, the restaurant, because I thought Luke might consider enjoying going to that restaurant. Well, that's the one that Luke picked. So we met up at Oscar's. We went inside. I could not see young Oscar at work. Often young Oscar is working behind the bar, but I couldn't see him. Luke and I sat down and we ordered our meal, and I was thrilled to find out that at this restaurant named Oscar's, they actually make a shredded beef chimichanga. Now, most places here in Owensboro, if you were to order a chimichanga or if you were to order a taco, they're made with ground beef. And many times you can take that taco and turn it up 90 degrees and just watch the grease drip out of it. And I go, that really can't be all that healthy for you. Now, when I lived in Arizona for 25 years, almost all of the restaurants out there served shredded beef chimichangas or shredded beef tacos. And I really grew to love them. When I moved back here to this part of the country, I think there's one place down in the Evansville area which sells those. And other than that, I don't know of any place here in Owensboro that sells who offers a shredded beef chimichanga. But the waiter, when I said chimichanga, he said, what type would you like to have? And he named off several things, chicken, ground beef, and I thought he said shredded beef. I said, would you say that again, please? Shredded beef. I said, oh, by all means, I would love to have a shredded beef chimichanga. And sure enough, that's what came to me a little later. And I must say, it was highly desirable. It was wonderful. And I have no doubt that Luke and I will go back to Oscar's multiple times. And when I do, I will either get the shredded beef chimichanga or shredded beef tacos. And I haven't had one of those in a long, long time. It was a quarter of a century since I moved from Arizona. So I will look forward to that. Well, as we were talking, Luke and I, and eating our meal, I looked over and I saw young Oscar behind the bar. And so I yelled out, Oscar! He saw us, got a big smile on his face. He very quickly came around, came and sat down at our table. And I would guess he stayed there an hour. And it was a very enjoyable conversation. Number one, Oscar is a very likable person. He truly is. And he and Luke have been friends for 5 or 6 years, and good friends. And it was most enjoyable for me to see and witness and to hear Oscar and Luke converse back and forth. And I told Luke later, it's sort of like the saying about Las Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I said, well, Luke, if we're in this type of setting, and if Oscar brings up something that maybe you wished he hadn't, I said, don't worry about it, because what happens at this dinner table stays here at this dinner table, and I'm not going to bring up anything about it. Well, the three of us, and they did more talking than I did. I enjoyed hearing them. And I did take a picture. So just for the record, now Don, just a second. Oh, let me go back and find it. Now Don, am I focused?
Yes.
Can they see the photograph?
Uh-huh.
Okay. On the left is Luke, who's wearing the blue shirt. And on the right, you see Oscar. And that jacket, Don, that he's wearing, in the corner, it says DC. That stands for Davis County High School. So anyway, that was an enjoyable moment, and all of us, I think, had a very good time from it. And I guess I could talk more about that, but I'll stop there. At one point, Oscar said, Luke's very important to you, isn't he? And I nodded my head and I said, yes, he is. He saved my life. And I told Oscar that story. And another part of that story that I don't know if I've told, I was in the hospital following that near-death experience for 5 days. And one day, my good buddy Percy came by the hospital and spent, I don't know, a half hour. It was a nice visit. And he eventually had to leave because he was cooking for his daughter's birthday celebration. And he had to get back to the house to do that. But I really enjoyed Percy coming over and expressing to me his sympathies or condolences or appreciations that I had lived through this ordeal. And I think I've told you this story before. Don, on that Saturday, this all started on a Thursday night. Now, on Saturday, Don walked over to the hospital. He walked to the hospital. It's a very long walk. I think it's close to 5 miles. Don thinks it might be less. Have you thought about it any?
It may only be 3. Depends on what way I go, I guess.
So I guess Don may take a shortcut. But if you go the way you drive, it seems like it would be about a 5-mile drive. It's out on the edge of town. Well, Don walked to that hospital room and stayed there and visited with me for, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours? It was a long visit, which I truly enjoyed because I was sort of going stir-crazy, just being stuck. And then the following day, on Sunday, Don came back in the afternoon and stayed for another long visit. And again, he walked. He walked all the way out to the hospital, and therefore he walked all the way back home. Not an easy trip to make, but he did it. And I appreciate it, and I will long remember it. The only other person who visited me besides doctors and nurses was my good friend Luke. And on those 5 days, Luke came every day, every evening, and stayed for many hours every day. And we talked and conversed, and we got to know each other even better than we had before. And I was very proud of Luke for doing it. Number one, I appreciated it deeply. It was very meaningful to me, and it was helpful to me. But I thought, how many people Luke's age would actually take such a big chunk of time out of their schedule just to come and visit this old fart? Did you hear that, Don?
Yes.
Remember there was a show, This Old House?
Uh-huh.
Well, I'm changing it just a bit. This old fart. Luke is a very good man with a very kind heart. And quite frankly, I don't know how many people I've met in my life that really live up to that standard. And so I always thought highly of Luke, and this just put my assessment of Luke like through the roof. And somewhere in all of that, I had some thoughts. So let me put my glasses on. Now, I must say, the last couple of years have been difficult and challenging years for me. And if you go back a little more, the challenge is even greater. I have had a number of people who at one time said to me that they were my friend, that they were my brother. I've even had people say to me, I would willingly give up my life to save yours. Well, thankfully, that hasn't happened to anyone. But some of these same people, over the last few months or the last few years, they will no longer speak to me. They will no longer answer a text from me. I presume they would not answer a telephone call from me. Now, if you were to ask them why, and if you were a good interviewer, you would probably find out that they don't even know why they've turned their back on me. But it's not the first time things like this has happened in the history of people who have attempted to follow the stories and the examples from the Bible. You remember ancient Saul, the king of Israel, took unto him David, and at one time treated him like he was a part of the family. But because of jealousy, and that's what it was, jealousy, envy, lust, greed, the very things that Mr. Ted talked about over and over. He always said that human nature is a collection of vanity, jealousy, lust, and greed. And because of those qualities, before it was over, King Saul was attempting to hunt down young David and to kill him. Now, how can you go from saying, I loved David like he was my own son, to end up wanting to kill the same king, the same David, who eventually became King David? That's a difficult thing to understand. Well, let me give you another example. Once upon a time, there was a powerful, highly responsible archangel named Lucifer. And God entrusted into Lucifer became in charge of the earth, of reshaping it, rebuilding it, preparing it for human habitation. It was a very important job in the plan of God. But Lucifer became jealous, envious, vanity, jealousy, lust, and greed. Vanity, jealousy, lust, and greed. Lucifer became jealous of the one we now call Jesus Christ. And I'm sure at one time Lucifer had great loyalty to the one we now call Jesus Christ. But at some point, every chance he ever has to destroy Jesus Christ, or the people who are loyal to Jesus Christ, Lucifer doesn't pass up the opportunity. And so because of the evil of vanity, jealousy, lust, and greed within his heart, the former Lucifer, or light bringer, that's what that word meant, became known what we now know him as Satan, the enemy, the adversary, Satan the devil. And Satan has had his mind completely twisted into just being full of hatred. Hatred, vanity, jealousy, lust, greed. And so the story of the Bible goes on. Well, in 2 Timothy, if you would turn to 2 Timothy, I'd like to point out something that Paul said. Let me get a drink of water. That tasted very nicely. 2 Timothy, chapter 1. He says, there's a whole lot here in chapter 1 we could read. I'm sure I've done it before, and I'm sure I will do it again. But notice what Paul says in chapter 15. He says, all they which are in Asia. Now that would be the area that we in our society today would call Turkey. In older times it was called Asia Minor. Here in this book it's called Asia. So Asia, Asia Minor, Turkey. In Bible talk they all mean the same thing. The Apostle Paul, and I could take you back into the book of Revelation in chapters 2 and 3. And there are 7 churches named. And those 7 churches were literally raised up by the personal efforts of the Apostle Paul. He created those churches. He ordained ministers to be a part of some of those churches. He ordained deacons to be a part of those churches. He directly participated in the establishment of these different areas and groups. But somewhere down the road, those people who at one time had looked to the Apostle Paul for the knowledge of eternal life began to think that they knew more than the Apostle Paul. Vanity, jealousy, lust, and greed. And because of that, they lost their loyalty to the Apostle Paul, and they started to form different unions and groups. And Paul says here in 2 Timothy, under the inspiration of the Spirit of God, he writes, all of they which are in Asia have turned away from me. And he mentions a name which I find difficult to pronounce, Phygellus and Hermogenes. Now, I'm glad my first name is not one of those, because it would be hard to teach people how to say your name. I guess back in that culture it was easier. And then he says over in chapter 4, and I've read this before, but it's worth reading, it's worth learning from. He says in chapter 4, verse 14, Alexander the coppersmith did me much evil. Now, I have always intuitively believed that Alexander the coppersmith at one time was an elder, an ordained minister. I can't prove that. It's just my instinct. And somewhere along the way, Alexander the coppersmith, as it says, did Paul much evil. It didn't say a little evil, it said much evil. And then Paul says, the Lord reward him according to his works. Whatever he deserves, Paul is saying to Jesus Christ, give him what he deserves. Now, if you would, in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, there's another little verse or phrase I want to read. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 6. And it says that no man go beyond or go out of his way on purpose, intentionally, and defraud his brother. I think you could also use the word to defame his brother in any manner, because that the Lord is the avenger of all such, as we also have forewarned you and we have testified. The Lord is the avenger of all such that defraud and defame their brother. You might even say their teacher at one time. I know of a person who for a time was very helpful to us here in Owensboro. But over the past few months, this person, in my opinion, and I don't think I'm wrong, became highly jealous. Sort of like Lucifer wanted to be higher up on the totem pole, but it was never going to be Lucifer's job, never, to move ahead of Jesus Christ. And when he was told, "No, Lucifer, you aren't going to jump up on the scale. Be happy, be content with the status that you have, because you have a very important job." And Lucifer's heart turned extremely bitter against the one we now call Jesus Christ. He was jealous of Jesus, and before it was over, he became extremely bitter about Jesus Christ. Well, folks, if anyone out there has ears to hear and eyes to see and a brain with which they can think, consider the few verses we've gone over. There are many, many, many more that we could do. But I do want you to know that this person who once claimed to be extremely loyal to me has done so many dirty, rotten little deeds. I'm not even going to take the time to share with you. In my opinion, he is a phony. He is a phony. And finally, I became aware of that. It sort of reminds me of a recent election we had. I think you know the one I'm talking about back on November 5th. I don't want to talk a whole lot of politics on this religious site, but we had two people running to be the President of the United States. One of these people had been president once before, and they lost once before, and his opponents did everything they could do to destroy him. They brought up impeachment charges that had no merit. They took him to court in different locations, and before a few months ago I did not know this word, but now this has become a standard word in the dictionary, or a modern dictionary. They employed lawfare, law, like courts, and they did everything they could to destroy him. They wanted to send him to prison. They wanted to bankrupt him. They wanted to humiliate him. They wanted to tell lies about him. And I must say, in my lifetime, I'm not sure I've ever seen another man go through more crap in order to become re-elected president. Individuals even tried to kill him on 2 occasions. And actually, we hear that there were other plots against him. And he simply with more tenaciousness than I've ever seen before in my life. He hung on to the idea that he wanted to make it back into the White House so that he could fight for America and for Americans and for our country and for our future. Is he a perfect man? No. He's made mistakes. Don, I'm going to confess something now for everyone.
Oh, no.
I have made mistakes in my life.
No.
Yes.
Okay.
And more than once. And some of them were pretty good ones.
Ooh.
But thankfully, my Savior and my brother and my eternal friend have forgiven me of my mistakes. But I've had to go to my brother in prayer and say, I've made mistakes. Would you please apply to me your mercy, your kindness, your forgiveness? And true to his word, he has. What I don't know about Donald Trump's religious life, I do have the feeling that since, was it in June when they took the first shot at him? About June 27th?
We got it on video. Remember?
Yeah, it was on the television. It was just before we turned the TV off to start a video. It seems to me that ever since then, Donald has been a little more humble. I don't think humility and Donald Trump, that those words go together very much in his life. But I think since June, he's found a new sense of humility and appreciation for the Almighty God and his protection. And I'm very thankful that he was protected. It would have happened right behind me on live television. Don's the one that saw it. I'm about ready to turn the TV off, and Don goes, no, something's going on. And oh my, was something going on. Now, Donald Trump won the election November 5th. He didn't win it just by a squeaker. I think his grand total was 312 electoral votes. Almost every area of the country became more and more supporters of Donald Trump. Even areas which had been traditionally Democratic showed great movement towards Donald Trump. Political scientists have never seen anything like it before. In my short lifetime, I've never seen anything quite like it before. And Donald's opponent, in her defense, I don't think she had spent a lot of time preparing to become president. And all of a sudden she was just pushed into the fight. But there's one thing I must say about Kamala. I don't think she did a very good job. She proved to me, beyond any doubt, that there was a quality of phoniness about her, fakeness, and that cackling laugh. It would be like something you would hear coming out of an insane asylum. Well, I don't want to beast on her. The election's over. And I hope that she goes on to have a happy life wherever she ends up. But I personally believe that our country will benefit from having Donald Trump as president. Will he make mistakes? Probably. Just like anybody else would. But does he seem to have a bigger grasp on what our nation needs to help overcome many of its problems? I think so. And I know on that June 27th, when he was in Pennsylvania, I forget the name of the town, Butler, Pennsylvania, when a bullet went through a part of his ear intended for his brain. When he got up, now, it would be difficult for most people if out of the blue somebody came up and punched him right in the mouth, full strength. It would be difficult for most people to eventually stand up and to have a coherent thought. I think it would pretty well rattle them, confuse them. Why did that happen? Why did you do that? What should I do? And I don't believe Donald Trump had any intention or expectation that he was going to be shot. He almost got his head blown open, sort of like John Kennedy did back in 1963, November, down in Dallas. Was that November 22nd?
Yes.
Wow.
It's coming up.
Yes, it is. But when he came up, and there were Secret Service people trying to grab him and pull him one way or this way, and he managed to stick a fist up in the air with blood streaming down the right side of his face. And he said, "Fight, fight, fight." At that point, they should have called off the election and said, Donald Trump is the winner. Because we will never see anything more courageous than that in our lifetimes. And I'm still moved when I see film clips of that event. Well, if you turn in the book of 2 Timothy, let me get a drink of water. 2 Timothy chapter 4. The Apostle Paul says in verse 6, I am now ready to be offered, meaning to die. And the time of my departure is at hand. The time of my death is at hand. Verse 7, I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith. Henceforth, verse 8, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day, and not to me only, but unto all of them also that love his appearing, the return of Jesus Christ, and the blowing of the seventh trump. Notice down in chapter 2, Now let me check here. Chapter 2, verse 3. I don't think this is the one I want. I don't think so. And I may have been looking at the wrong verse. Here we go. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 3. You therefore endure hardship as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. No man that wars entangles himself with all the affairs of this life, that he may please him who has chosen him to be a soldier. Be a good soldier. And I'm trying to find another verse. Well, there are several verses that have this theme to it. Even though the Apostle Paul was working directly under Jesus Christ, in his physical life, he knew that he had to fight. He had to be a good soldier. He had to endure. And I think there are people who claim to be a part of the body of Jesus Christ who have never learned that lesson. And so, as that country western song goes, again, Don and I will not be able to think of the singer who sang it. And I wish that we would. And it goes something like this. I beg your pardon. I never promised you a rose garden.
Jeannie C. Riley?
Pardon?
Jeannie C. Riley?
No.
Not her.
But it's, we ought to look it up sometime. Along with the sunshine, there's going to come a little rain sometime. So the game plan is not to move forward until you run into a problem and then to run away or to hide. The game plan is to move forward, doing your best to follow the words of the Bible and the teachings of Jesus Christ. And then when you come to that problem, that you fight your way through it with Jesus Christ being your main soldier. But we must have a spirit of fight. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people who claim some association with the concept of being Christian, and that means different things to different people, as I guess all of you can figure out. But for so many of those people, they think of being a Christian as being a meek submissive, weak individual. They do not consider that at times... Don, did you ever see the movie True Grit?
Yeah.
John Wayne? And remember in that final climactic scene, he puts the reins of the horses into his mouth and he pulls out both of his pistols. And I don't know what he said, but it probably wouldn't be something you would say at your grandmother's birthday. His actions were, I'm going to fight. You think you're taking me down easily? Oh, no. Oh, you may cause me trouble, and you may knock me down, but I'm going to get back up. And in the end, Jesus Christ is going to bless me. And in the end, Jesus Christ will give to me the victory. And to those that have been fake Christians, phony Christians, pretend Christians, he's going to say to them someday, I never knew you. I don't know who you are. He's going to motion to his angelic beings to take that person away. But to those people who are willing to fight. Now, do I have things in my life that have caused me to want to fight? I've had a lot of things in my life that have wanted me to fight. One of the things of late has been a terrible problem I've been having with my toe, or maybe my toes. And Don showed you the hat, or he handed me the hat, Save the Toe. This is the 1, 2, 3, 4. This may be the 4th or the 5th time, Don, I've had to fight to save my toe. And in the end, Jesus Christ has always come through. And I fully expect that in the end, just like John Wayne coming to the rescue, Jesus Christ will ride in on a white horse and save me once again. Just like he sent Luke to find me on the evening of September 5th. Jesus Christ sent Luke to find me to save my life. And that is not an exaggeration. And I'm very, very proud of how Luke conducted himself. And I will say this again, I've said it before. In my opinion, there is more goodness in Luke's little finger than a whole bunch of these people put together. More goodness in Luke's little finger than all of them combined, many times over. I'm very, very thankful that Jesus Christ brought Luke into my life. It's literally been a lifesaver. In my jacket over there in the hallway, I have a packet of lifesavers. Have I showed that to you, Don?
I think once before you did. Been a while.
Well, I gave some to Luke.